In this lesson, we're going to be setting up your virtual server. We're going to be using Linux as your virtual server, and there should be a link in the lesson where you can download the zip file. We apologize, it's actually 1.3 gig, so you may want to go ahead and run this and download it overnight as soon as possible. Once it's downloaded, we need you to create a folder called ADB on your desktop, place the zip file in there, and unzip it. What this is actually a server image. Essentially, I created a Ubuntu Linux server. I installed several different software packages, did some configuration, and then I zipped it up and again provided it to you. So essentially, we're going to be using VirtualBox as our host. And what that means is when we attach the server and start it up, you're going to have the exact same system, the exact same copy of Ubuntu with all the software I installed on your machine. And I know you've used VirtualBox in previous classes. VirtualBox is the software which provides the virtual system. But when we restore the server, Ubuntu, it doesn't know it's virtual. Essentially, it's going to be an entire server, and when after you unzip it, it is 8.59 gig. But it thinks it's its own server sitting on a hardware server somewhere, a computer somewhere. So the virtual system doesn't know it's virtual. The reason why we're using VirtualBox in this way is when you graduate, you're going to be attaching to servers remotely, whether it's an actual physical server, or maybe it's a virtual server on Rackspace or Amazon. And working with a virtual server is actually very similar to working with a server over in off your machine. It doesn't matter whether that server is remote in another room, in another city, in another country. As long as you have the network settings and the permission set up, you can connect to that server. So let's go through the setup. Again, you should have downloaded this VDI file, created ADB on your desktop. Please do not move this folder. After this course, you may want to go ahead and delete it or move it or do whatever you want with it. For now, until you finish this course, the ADB, Advanced Databases, please put the folder here, unzip the file, and leave this as is for now. Don't move it. It will corrupt the server and you will have to start over again. So, you should have VirtualBox that looks like this. You may have some servers here from previous courses or not. Go ahead and hit New. We're going to create a server called ADB, and it is going to be a Linux Ubuntu server, 64-bit. Now I also set all the passwords for this box to ADB just for simplicity. So let's hit continue. Now it's asking for how much meg should this server run, and we're going to just increase it to 2048. You could also click in here and type it. By the way, all the instructions are also here in the PowerPoint I'm providing. Okay, once that's done, hit continue. And now here's an important one. If we say create a virtual disk now, it means we have to go through the entire install. Overall, that was about a 6 to 8 hour process. So we're going to make this real simple. Hit use an existing virtual hard disk file. Click this here, that's supposed to be a folder. And now go ahead and go to your desktop, go into that ADB folder, and select that VDI file and hit open. If we hit create, we're pretty much done. We've actually now attached to this file here, and it recognizes it. And in a moment, we're going to go ahead and start that up, but it is the entire server in there. But once again, do not move this folder, do not mess with this file. If you do, it will provide some problems. All right, so now we need to start it up. So go ahead and hit start. Every class where we're using VirtualBox, you will have to go ahead and start VirtualBox, go ahead and start this one up, and watch your server start. Now, this may take a moment. We do have to do some configuration. We need to configure what's called port forwarding. Okay, if you come to this part, it means the server has started. And we're just going to leave this over here for now. But since this server doesn't know it's a virtual server, we need to set up some port forwarding in order to talk to it. And what we need to do is go over to settings up here. We need to go to network. We need to go to port forwarding. And there's a little plus button up here. I have the list of ports we need to forward. So we need to put port, don't put any of the host or IPs in here. It's going to be port 2222, and the guest port is going to be 22. And I also have an image here to show you how the port should go in here. I only have a couple in here. We added a few more as the course went on. But here's what it means. In networking, and I know this isn't a networking degree, but you need to know a little bit of networking. When you go ahead and talk to a computer, it can have many programs running on it. Now that computer, that server, whatever it is, has an IP address if it's on a network. That's that 192.168.1. something and a local network. Don't make a difference. It's a series of numbers. However, once you get to the computer you're looking for, now we need to talk to the actual program we're looking for. So the best way to think of it is if you called up an office, there's a number to reach the office. And then once you reach the office, there's an extension to actually reach a person. Same thing here. We have a IP address, which is what this computer has. Your MacBook has an IP address. And being that this is a virtual server, it shares that IP address. But we need to say which ports talk to this, the virtual box, as opposed to talking to the software on your Mac. Remember you installed MAMP? Well, it had Apache, it had MySQL in it. And MySQL listened on port, I believe it was 8888. So I don't want to put it on the same port because that will go ahead and conflict with Apache. So anyway, go ahead and let's go through and add all of these in. So we're going to do port 8000 goes to port 80. And port 10,000 goes to port 10,000. And port 3306 goes to port 3306. And then port 27017 should go to 27017. So once you have all this entered, just hit OK, and now those settings are saved. Okay. The next thing we're going to need to do is we need to go ahead and talk to this virtual server. And you've probably heard of something called SSH. What that does is it allows us to go ahead and communicate with another server over a text module. So in order to configure that, we need to start up Terminal. We're going to be doing a lot of work in Terminal. So you can hit the little magnifying glass here and do TERMIN. There we go, Terminal. Comes up with a nice little window like this. Yours may not be white. The color doesn't make a difference. But over here it'll say your name or maybe the name of the machine. And from where we are, I need you to do sudo nano/etc. Anytime I say etc, it's also referred to as etc, but it's also referred to as etc in the industry. Host, and hit enter. It'll ask you for the password. This is the password to your computer. Now, I'm going to make this a little larger so we can see it. What we need you to do is towards the end, I just need you to add this line here. 127.0.0.1 space ADB server with a capital S. I know I have some other stuff in here. You may or may not have this. If your file is blank, that may be an issue. Make sure you're editing the right file. Make sure you typed this sudo nano etc/etc/hosts properly. But what I need you to do is just add this one line. And you can use the up and down arrows to move down to the bottom and just type it in. When you are done, hit the Control and the X key. That means exit. If you look down at the bottom, here are some of the commands. The little caret over there is the control on your keyboard. So hit Control and X, and it will probably say, do you want to save this? I didn't change mine, so it didn't ask me. Hit yes, or type in yes and hit enter, and then it will ask you, what do you want to save it as? We're going to save it as the exact same name as we opened it, so just hit enter. So what that is going to do is it's actually going to say anytime we reference ADB server, we want to talk to the VirtualBox. So now we have this line here, SSH -p 2222 ADB server. And when you hit enter, it asks you for a password. The password is ADB. And now it's going to come up with some information. ADB. And I got the wrong password. So, and that's the reason I did. I mistypoed. Oh, I typoed. So let's try this again. It's SSH -p 2222 ADB at ADB server. Now when it asks for the password, it's ADB. And you can see it says, welcome to Ubuntu, we're logged in. Essentially, here's what happened. This window is no longer talking to the Mac. It's talking through the Mac, but it's talking to this server. So normally at this point, we would just minimize these two, because most of our work is going to be done inside of this window. And if you ever want to confirm whether you're at the Windows, what do you call it? Sorry, not Windows, at your Mac prompt, or you're at the Linux prompt, the Ubuntu server prompt, go look at over here. It should say ADB at Ubuntu ADB. The name of the server is Ubuntu ADB. The user we're logged into is ADB. So now we're actually talking to the server. So if I do something like an ls, it shows me this one file. By the way, ls just lists what's in the current directory. If I go ahead and open up another terminal, and I'm just going to hit Command N, and you see here it has my name. If I do ls here, these are all the different files I have on my Mac. But since we SSH'd into a server, you see all the files on that server now. So, next is a little review of some commands. And these are, you may or may not have seen these before. These are basically Mac and Linux command line commands. So, sudo. Anytime you type sudo space and a command, it gives you root privileges. By default, we're logged in here as ADB. So if I want to do something with global privileges, and we'll see when that happens, if you type sudo space something, it will run it under a different permissions. pwd lets you know where you are. So if I type pwd and hit enter, I know I'm in the /home/ADB directory. I'll minimize this too so we can get a better view here. That just lets you know your location. Now if I want to move around, I can say cd space ... and if I type pwd again, I'm just in the home directory. cd ... takes you back a directory. Now if I want to see what's in my directory, I could type ls, and there's ADB, again, /home/ADB. We move back a directory and we're in home, so there's ADB. We can also go forward, so I could say cd space ADB. Here's a little trick. If you type cd and you type A and hit the tab button, as long as it's unique, it will find the matching directory and fill in the rest of it. So now I'm back in my home/ADB directory, which is my home directory. There are also a couple of other commands like mkdir. That stands for make a new directory. And later on we're going to see we may have to use change mode and change owner. And that's just a permissions thing. But these are just basic command line commands that you should know. You can also do date, and that just gives you the date and time. But the other one, and we just used it previously, was nano. Nano is a text editor. So if I say nano and I give it a name like, oh, I don't know, john.txt, it's going to open up a new file because it doesn't exist. And I can put John was here. I'm going to hit Command X. It's going to say, do you want to save it or not? I'll hit Y for yes. It says, do you want to write it as this name? I'll hit Enter to confirm. And now if I do an ls, there's that john.txt. The Ubuntu Linux operating system works a lot like the Mac operating system, just without the GUI. And the GUI means all the nice, clicky, fun graphical stuff we have. Oh, besides ls, you could do an ls minus L, and that just gives you more details, like who's the owner. We just created the file as ADB, so john.txt is owned as ADB, when it was modified, and what the permissions are. And we'll get into those details later. Okay, next, we're going to have to FTP into there. And what FTP is, it's called File Transfer Protocol. We need to be able to move files from one location to another. So here's what we need to do. You need to go ahead and first download FileZilla Client, and the link will be in the Install Software lesson, which you should have previously done. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to hit FileZilla. Now, I use this all the time in my professional career, so it's going to look maybe slightly different. But what I need you to do is we need to add a connection to the server. So we're going to go over here, click on this button here. As you can see, I have a whole bunch of stuff here. You're going to hit New Site, type in ADB, or yes, ADB. The host name is going to be ADB Server. The port number is 2222. If you look here, drop this down to where it says SFTP protocol. Login's normal, and the username and password are both ADB. So again, it's in this PowerPoint if you need to look that up. Once that's done, hit connect. Okay. Now I want to show you something in this. I'll make it a little larger. Over on the right, sorry, the left here is your computer. So you see here I have a Dropbox, I have a full sail folder, and I have a full sail class folder. This over here, these are the windows that show my directory. On the right, these are the windows that show the Ubuntu server. And what you'll notice is when I logged in, it took me to my home directory. And over here, you see HTML, jcameron, 2 files, and then john.txt. And over here, you see those same files. Now, if I was to take a file like this and drag it, you know what? I'll just drag it to my desktop. And I'm going to go through here, and I have all these files. I'm going to go to, you probably don't have all of this, but I have a lot more. There we go. I go to my desktop. And let's just say for a moment I go into that ADB folder. You don't have to do this. I just want you to watch. There's that VDI file and the VDI zip file. If I drag this over to here and let go, it appears here. Well, now if I open up my ADB folder on my desktop, there's john.txt. We can drag files left to right or right to left, and that will move files from our desktop or from our MacBook to the server. And again, it's a virtual server, but it could be a server in another location in the cloud, wherever, and vice versa. So that's how we move files back and forth from one location to another off of our server. So let me minimize that. I just want to make sure that's configured. Next thing we need to do is set up MySQL. And we have MySQL in MAMP, but that's on our Mac. Now we need to go ahead and set it up on the server itself. So over here at the Ubuntu prompt, we're going to type MySQL -u root -p. So MySQL -u root, that means minus user, we're logging in as root. -p means ask us the password. And I'll type ADB as the password. And if you notice, now I have a MySQL prompt. This is the same as the query window in SQL. If I type in SQL here, it will work. It'll give us the exact same response as if we went in and copied it and ran it through SQL Pro. So I'm going to move some windows around so I can see this as I type. But what we need to do is we need to type this command over here. It's create user single quote root at 10.0.2.2, and that needs to be in quotes as well, identified by ADB. Yep. Now we're going to go ahead and actually grant root some permissions, because when you create an instance, an install of MySQL, you can only connect locally, which means currently you can only talk to MySQL from your VirtualBox. We want to talk remotely from, MacBook, your MacBook. So in order to do that, we actually have to create a user and grant root some permissions. Now, if you are copying this, please note that sometimes these single quotes get slanted. You want to go ahead and correct them. Those slanted quotes or apostrophes. They will cause some errors. Now we're going to grant all privileges on star. That means every database, every table, every permission to root at 10.0.2.2. And this address is specifically a VirtualBox issue. We have to do this grant in order for this to work. So we'll say with grant option. What we're doing here is specifically a VirtualBox configuration, this 10.0.2.2, but run those two commands. Okay, and at this point, we are nearly done. What I want you to do is over in this window, we have to type exit to get out of the MySQL terminal. Then we have to type exit again to get out of that SSH terminal. Now you see we're back on the Mac. We're no longer into the Ubuntu server. So let's close this window. And now we're going to take what's called a snapshot of your server. So I'm going to close down FileZilla. And I'm going to go back to the VirtualBox here. And I'm going to right click. Now I could go ahead here and say pause or something. That's really not what we want to do. In order to shut down your virtual server, you want to go and open this window. It may just be blank if you click in here. Oh, sometimes it's blank. There's a little X window here, little X button. If you click it, never say just save machine, never say power off the machine. That's essentially pulling the plug. You always want to say send shutdown signal, hit OK, and wait for the server to shut down properly. Okay, now that it says powered off, we're going to create what's called a snapshot. So go over here to snapshots, and this looks like a little camera. Hit this button, and what I'm going to do is call this, let's see, install 1, and hit OK. Now what does this mean? If you recall in SQL Pro, we took SQL dumps. Those were backups of the database. So if you made an error, and let's say you deleted all your users or deleted a table, you can go to back to your backup, restore it, and then you'd have all that data at that point in time. This is the same concept, but we're doing it as a server level, meaning we've just backed up the entire server at this point. So let's go ahead and say you do the next few lessons and you type in a command you don't mean to, or for whatever reason the server goes bad, maybe you delete some data, you can go back to here, click on one, and you can say restore, and we'll see that process a little later. Currently, we haven't restarted it, so I can't do a restore. It technically hasn't changed. But what it will do is it'll roll everything in that server back to this point in time. So once you're at this point, we have a backup. I'm going to go back to my details, and that is the end of this lesson.